Hello, this is Francis from McCaffrey's Crafts, and today in this kind of bit of a cold morning here in Ireland, I thought I'd continue in my series while I got a chance, because I think Father's Day is coming up there, so I'm getting a little bit busy, which is good sign. But anyway, let these continue. So today I thought I'd focus on the type of sticks which were used in some of the faction fights, and bear in mind that they vary from place to place and even from the description to description. There is one common trait among a lot of the stick fighters, and that is the blackthorn. The blackthorn would have been used quite commonly among the blackthorn. But today I thought I'd discuss just a few of the other kind of weaponry as well that was used. Now, my source on this today is that the Folklore Commission in Ireland has recorded a number of descriptions of sticks used by stick fighters, and like one such example is there's a guy in Dungarvan, and he was called Jackie. What's he called? I have written down here Jackie Ryan, and he recalled that he heard 30 years previous that in a story anyway, he reportedly said, I saw the stick my grandfather used to have. There was a strap on the side of the head, and it was smeared for fear a crack would come in it. The strap was a very as fat as my finger. The stick was put under the thatch. Holly and oak were the two types on the march. They would have greased and polished them as if they were boots. So this first description from Ryan, he's describing one of the sticks that he had heard about, and it's interesting there. He said the strap was about as thick as his finger, so it was a good heavy thick strap at the bottom, and it kind of gives us an indication of how the sticks were treasured. They used to polish it. They used to take care of it. They were worried that that's going to crack and be no good anymore. So they obviously maybe attached some kind of, they had their favorite stick. And again, that's the thing with all stick fighters. You find a stick that is good for you and your abilities. There's no standard stick size. There's no standards. It depends on your weight, your height, how you can hold something with your wrists, what gives you the advantage. It's a very kind. It's like selecting a gun or something like that. You just kind of pick the stick that kind of suits you. Here's another account in Galway in 1937. There was a guy called Paddy Fitzpatrick, and he was talking about his father, who was born in 1801, and he said, in my young days, every man carried a blackthorn stick, and he said that the men who would not have a blackthorn carried what they called a loading butt, made from the handle of a whip. Okay, and Paddy kind of went on further then to describe. He said that look, it was narrow at the top and thick at the bottom, and it was loaded at the bottom to make it heavy so it could give you a deadly blow. Now, the idea of the loading book, many people get confused and they think, can you lead load the blackthorn? No, no. The idea was that if you had a blackthorn, it was thick, it was dense already, and there's great weight in it. So, and you didn't need to lead load a blackthorn. But if you had another type of wood that was much lighter and less dense than blackthorn, then you would load it. And a lot of people used to load things like ash or another type of wood that wouldn't be as thick or as heavy as blackthorn. So when you hear like a loading butt, it kind of, as you hear in this guy's description, it's like the handle of a whip. So think of it more like a kind of like a baton type of shape, kind of a bit narrow at the bottom, and it kind of tapers out and gets kind of thicker at the top. I did find a faction that actually did like to use the ash the loading butts a lot. I think there's a guy called written down here Richard Deanahan of Gorton Across in West Limerick. He was saying that it, again, all recorded by the Folklore Commission, that it was loaded ash sticks that were always the favourite fighting stick where he lived. Richard, who was 85 years of age in 1950, related that one of the first things he had ever heard spoke of around the fire at home was the faction. So the stories of the faction were always a common thing to tell the kids, and you'd hear the grown-ups speaking at the time, and this is how a lot of the stories and myths and legends were passed down, because things weren't written down per se in Ireland. A lot of it would be through storytelling and through telling of it. And he said that in his thing, he said the blackthorn was a good heavy stick, but in Limerick, they thought it was better to have the ash. They said the toughest kind of ash is not the ash plant as is generally supposed, but the sucker. Okay. Let me explain what the sucker is on an ash plant. So, say you have an ash tree that's growing up and you cut it at the trunk, and then you're just left with like a stump. Like, it's just that the trunk is there. Then what happens is shoots will start to come out of this cut trunk. And what he's saying is these shoots are called a sucker. So, as one of these shoots cuts out and you use then the thick trunk, then you have like a pretty good fighting stick. And this is how they were doing it in West Limerick at the time. They probably didn't have blackthorn there. I don't see too much blackthorn when I've been around Limerick and driving around there. So again, ash was the type that they used a lot in there. And again, he went on to say, a blow from it could smash a bone. And he was going on about how the ash tree was what it is. But other people have kind of other names as well for the fighting stick, like in Irish, they would call it the Clá Alpine. The Clá Alpine was like Irish for like a knobby kind of stick. Say for example, there's a guy called Samuel Carter Hall, and he was part of like a husband and wife team of writers that kind of travelled throughout Ireland in the 1820s. I think it was 1825. And he was saying that reporting about seeing the blackthorn. He said in some places a kippeen, a little stick, which would be just like a shorter version of a blackthorn, was the most useful weapon in close fighting, as there wasn't enough room to swing the usual stick or the 8-foot wattle. So he's reported there are 3 sticks that he's seen. He's seen this little small stick that they used to use in close quarters. He said that the normal stick, which would be the 3-foot type of blackthorn, and he said also they used to have like these longer sticks, which he said was about 8 foot tall. There's reports of them being like about 4 foot tall. Like an 8 foot tall stick would be quite hard to kind of maybe like a little javelin thrown around. But again, it's interesting. Like these things have been written down and reported, and I doubt he was close enough to see the actual length of the stick. So he's just kind of reporting what he would have seen when he was looking at the faction fight. It was actually from this guy Samuel Carter Halls who reported about how these sticks were seasoned, and there's always a lot of references in all the stick books regarding this of what he said. He said that the stick was sometimes tempered in a dung heat or a slack lime, and often found it was rubbed in butter and put up the chimney, or is left to season for months. Okay. So again, like he kind of is the main reference that of how to season a stick, but there's many different ways to season a stick. He said, look, with his way, people would just throw it somewhere in the farm, which was usually like a kind of a dung heap. They'd put it up the chimney, they'd smear it with butter, but like people use what they had. Like if someone had a better way, there's a few different ways which seasons a stick. There's no set way. This is how you season the fighting stick, and that's it. Like some people would leave it in an airy place. Some people turn their dung pile. Like a lot of them would have been kind of from farming communities at the time. Interesting as well that the Dublin University magazine of 1861 claims that the Alpine was the stick most commonly used in faction fighting, and this kind of makes sense that if faction fighting is going to be quite close quartered, people would be using the kind of like smaller type of sticks as well, because it'd be harder to kind of jump in and jump out with the other sticks. That's not to say people brought those sticks and used them as well. Like not everyone would fight the same way. It would be quite diverse. So there's kind of like a few examples of a few of the type of the references that I could find regarding the fighting sticks. And again, there's so many different kinds, and I can probably go into it a bit more detail in another video. But sure, we'll leave it at that for today's lesson. And thanks for supporting my channel. And Father's Day is coming up. You want to buy a gift, I can still get it to you before Father's Day. All right, thank you.